Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Jeremy Shore, Director of Early Childhood Education and Technology Innovation at TIES, the Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM, and a proud City Club member. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Yong Zhao, Foundation Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of Kansas. According to a 2016 World Economic Forum report, advances in technology could displace as many as 5 million jobs by 2021. Furthermore, according to the same report, 65% of children entering elementary school today will, as adults, be working in jobs that do not currently exist. How do we prepare our children for this vast revolution? Can we adapt our current educational models to account for this changing employment landscape and skills requirement? Or do we need to entirely rethink how we educate our children? Our speaker today is uniquely qualified to address these questions. Dr. Zhao's works focus on the implication of globalization and technology on education. In addition to his position at the University of Kansas, Dr. Zhao is also a professorial fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Health and Education Policy at Victoria University in Australia. He previously served as the presidential chair and director of the Institute for Global and Online Education in the College of Education at the University of Oregon, where he was also a professor in the Department of Educational Measurement, Policy, and Leadership. Born in what he calls the most ordinary village in China, Dr. Zhao came to the United States in 1992 after accepting a position as a visiting scholar at Linfield College in Oregon. He received both his AM and Ph.D. in education from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. An author of more than 100 articles and 30 books, Dr. Zhao was previously the University Distinguished Professor at the College of Education at Michigan State University. He also served as founding director of the Center for Teaching and Technology and executive director of the Confucius Institute and the U.S.-China Center for Research on Educational Excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Dr. Yong Zhao.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you for having me here in Cleveland. I know I've always wanted to return to Ohio. When I lived in Michigan, always drive by here, and you guys have the best state troopers on the road. It's always, I think I contributed a lot to the Ohio economy, paying a few tickets. That was pretty good. So thank you. Seriously, this is very good. I always like the Midwestern people. You know how to handle cold, right? It's you actually love this kind of penetrating, cold, and you feel good. And I admire people who can handle this. So thank you for having me. And it was kind of, Steph said that something that was kind of scared me. He said, you have people speak and then they get nominated to the cabinet. And that was, so I hope that doesn't happen to me. Okay, that's now education is a really interesting topic at this moment. And the last 2 weeks, I don't know if you've heard of this. Last 2 weeks released 2 big international data sets. One is called TIMSS, that's called Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. It's about some 60-some countries participating in that. If you can guess, how did Americans do? All right, I won't answer that. But the last week, the PISA came out, called Program for International Student Assessment. OECD, 72 educational systems participated. This is 15-year-olds in science, math, and reading. How did we do? American students, pretty bad. So you read any headlines out of these 2 studies coming out, they would say, American education is in crisis. American education is getting worse. It's in decline. So I always trace this data. And from my research, I would tell you, don't worry about it. American education is not in decline. It's not getting worse. It has always been bad. If you like data, 1967, the first international mathematics study was conducted. Only 12 countries participated, only the Western Bloc, remember, Cold War time. Americans' 12th graders ranked 12th out of 12 countries. Now that's bad if you know math. That's bad. 12th out of 12 countries. That's 1967. So if some of you were a 12th grader in America in 1967, you are supposed to have ruined this country because you were so bad in math, right? Remember those things? Has this country been ruined yet? Not yet, So people always wonder, why is America still here? Canadians want to know. It's for example, right? We've never done well on international tests. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. So that's the excellent part. Education concerns really two big issues, excellence and equity. So if you use any of those test scores as measures, America never had excellent education. Equity, we can talk a little bit more. I would address that later. So let's think about that. Why did America do so poorly on this test scores, but yet remains, I cannot promise it's going to continue, remains one of still actually the leading innovative country? What happened? And America, however, has been trying to close those excellent gaps. In 1957, remember, we were trying to deal with Russia, Soviet Union, Sputnik time. So we had IDEA, the education, not IDEA, there's Education Defense Act. That's how it happened. 1983, some of you may remember, that was called A Nation at Risk. Remember those? So we've been doing education reforms, trying to catch up to somebody. American education doesn't move unless we find some enemies. So that's we always try to deal with somebody else. We want to surpass the Russians, we surpass the Japanese. Remember this? Now it's the Chinese. It's always somebody else. So we've been trying to close these gaps, and for so long, we have not moved in terms of our ranking, international ranking. We have how many reforms have done? Do you remember No Child Left Behind? We still have people left behind. Remember those? Remember Race to the Top? So we've done a lot of those reforms. And how come we have not made much progress in education? The same data would show NAEP, the National Report Card, hasn't moved. The gap hasn't closed. And we're not getting more excellent. So what I would like to explain to you to think about, what matters in education? In education, we often talk about the how to do education better as if we know exactly what a good education is. We don't question those things. So I was interested in looking at one thing I call side effects. In medicine, you guys getting cold season, you buy Tylenol, you're supposed to read the warning label. Have you seen those warning labels? This might cure a runny nose, but could cause a bleeding stomach. In education, have you received any notes like that? This policy can do this, but might do this. This program may increase your reading scores, but may make your children hate reading forever. You haven't seen those warning labels coming your way, right? So I was looking at the data. I said, what matters? So I looked at the international data. It's precisely what happened to Asian countries. East Asian countries, by the way, when they say America is always bad, the top performing countries have always been East Asian countries, where I came from. So you have the Confucian culture circle, or the chopsticks users, always trumpet. The fork users. So that was the East Asian systems like Singapore, Korea, Japan, Chinese Taipei or Taiwan, depends on your political view, and Hong Kong and Macau, and recently Vietnam has shown up to be very good test takers. So if you look at all these systems, and one thing they don't have, the same test score, which is not reported, is they ask children, do you like math? Do you value math? Are you interested in learning more math? Do you think you can do math or science? So confidence, attitude, and overwhelmingly, these children have less confidence. So Americans, we are not very good, but we're confident, I don't score very well, but I think I can do it. Now you have to ask yourself that question. That question is important to ask. If you can score, but you hate to doing this thing, are you likely going to pursue that? Probably not. Okay, so one thing I want you to think about is the side effects idea. The second thing I was just trying to push onto for you to think about, all these reforms we've been trying to do, are we really solving these problems or are we causing more damages? I would say we are causing a lot more damages. For example, achievement gap is a very interesting concept. First of all, the achievement gap is deeply rooted in historical social inequities. It's not going to be solved by teachers alone. However, the Common Core, the standards, the testing, accountability, I would say is a very easy and lazy excuse for the society to address a much bigger problem. But even with this trying to address this one, actually is very interesting. For example, we talk about the SAT, all the scores. We treat them as really important things. And we see that certain minority groups, I think African Americans, have traditionally always been below the other dominant groups. So we think there's an achievement gap. Okay. But we use that gap to keep people away from access in college. But does SAT matter? If you look at any research, says doesn't matter. It contributes very little to college success. If you read another story, actually 2 days ago, came out of Reuters, talk about how the college board is such a mess by trying to tie the SAT to the Common Core in those things. And they did not even release the correct data out, and they were trusting that. So if actually there's a lot of data, hundreds of thousands of students have been studied. Those who submitted the standardized test scores versus those who didn't, there's no significant difference. Now, why do we use that gap to keep people away? Why do we artificially try to push people to do the same thing? The same thing actually can go to literacy and numeracy. So all this reform right now, what I would call, has caused a lot more damages. America had fairly good foundation of education. In a book called The Race Between Education and Technology, two Harvard economists talked a lot about how the American traditional virtues and talk how the traditional virtues of American public education delivered the prosperity we have enjoyed. And they come up with the following, called traditional virtues. Think about this. Number one, public funding. Number two, public provision. Those are very important things, but that's different. Public funding and public provision. What happened in America? Why hasn't America been ruined yet by those bad test takers in the 1960s? One thing is that we're very diverse. We produce a lot more entrepreneurs, creators, and diverse talents. So you can diversify economy because as you've lived long enough, economy is always driven by innovations. Economy is driven by different individuals. If a system only produces one type of people, it's not going to work. So public provision allowed a lot more children, regardless of their background, to have a chance to play in this one. Now, there are many systems to pre-select children, pre-sort them. Once you do that, you are only basically picking people who are like you. It's a country club. It's not public education. Provision. Some other features, which is interesting too. That's, by the way, we're losing all this now. Another one is called, America is a very forgiving system, education system, traditionally forgiving. And I noticed some young children here, young students here. In America, traditionally, really, you can play for 12 years and nobody sorts you. Even if you fail high school, you can still get a second chance, we call it GED. We all have had our youthful transgressions. You've done things you haven't told your parents yet, I'm sure. You do not kick people out very early. You do not retain them. You give them a chance to try it. And that is how you experiment with yourself. Now with all this so-called, no zero tolerance, no excuse system, we are actually depriving our children of those opportunities. Our poor children come to school who are not able to read. What we do? We say, well, don't do music anymore. Let's fix your reading. The more you fix them, the more you hate them, and you're depriving them a chance of possibly becoming successful in other areas. Our poor children now in urban areas, because of No Child Left Behind, because of the so-called accountability in literacy and numeracy, they actually have been deprived more opportunities because their parents cannot afford the extra opportunities in music, in arts, in sports. So that's what we've done, a lot more harm. Then we have other traditional virtues, separation of state and church, gender equity. We have other such virtues as well. We talk a lot about our system being flexible. Now we are losing all of this because what we're trying to do, we're trying to close the gap with other countries. We're trying to be excellent, trying to score well on these tests. I've been battling with a lot of the international organizations that said, you just have to stop that. You're misleading people. You're destroying this. While we're losing that, we have a new challenge. The challenge is very scary, as Jeremy was talking about. It's called the fourth industrial revolution. Every time when we face a revolution, we got to change. We have, think about this idea. You guys used to use Nokia. Remember Nokia? Not for you. You're too young to know Nokia. Nokia was the best cell phone maker, largest cell phone maker in the 1990s. Where are they now? You're using something else called smart devices now, right? But if you look at the last few years of Nokia, it was actually adding some features that almost resembles Apple's iPhone. Do you remember those things? But what happened? Why did it not work? Because Nokia was adding smartphone features on the dumb phone system. It's a dumb phone platform. So Apple came up with a company needing redevelop something. So today, all these reforms we're trying to do, what are the reforms we're doing today? The Common Core. Everybody required to know the same thing at exactly the same time, which is absurd. And number two, we're doing more standardized testing. That is, if you test well, you're going to be successful. We're forcing schools and teachers to comply with really what I call things that don't necessarily matter. And all of these things looks like we're improving education, but we're not. We're trying to fix the past. So when there's all these international tests come out to say, okay, why those countries score so well? Why can't we score as well? I said, why do you want to score well? In 2009, that's why I wrote a book called Catching Up or Leading the Way. Do you want to catch up to your past, or do you want to invent the future? So what the future holds for us is really quite scary. So I think Ohio is the best place to look. Last election, I'm not supposed to talk about that, but the last election was a good example to look. We did not talk about the job losses due to technology. You know very well, technology has replaced a lot of jobs. Today, the best term we always use in this country is called career and college readiness. You know how silly that concept is? Really, how can you be ready for careers that don't exist? And why should we be ready for college? College should always be ready for us. If you're paying for it, and have you thought about this? The idea, it's getting even worse. Now we have kindergarten readiness. Why do we do that? Kindergarten readiness. Have you seen some of the standards? I mean, by the way, another absurd thing is that when they measure this so-called readiness, it has nothing to do with you being ready or not. It really has to do with a test. I've seen a lot of kindergarten readiness tests. It's just random letters of words. If you can sound them, you're ready. And there's I saw a state standard of kindergarten readiness. It says, being able to stay awake during the day. Another one is called being able to walk in a straight line. That's what you do when you get caught by Ohio cop. But this, I guess we need a kind of head start, in this idea. Now, when you think about this, where did this readiness come? We're not stupid. The policymakers are not stupid, but what they have is this idea of the Nokia mentality. We can fix something to get better, but when revolution happens, you need a revolution. You cannot fix the horse wagon to the moon. You can't, really, I'm sorry about that. It's we're still talking about Volkswagen today, but we need a big change. So when technology takes jobs away, by the way, a lot of jobs, smart jobs. There's a smart technology we're talking about. There's accounting. You know how many we've lost accounting? Car insurance, right? You look at now today, Uber is delivering drivers' cars now already in San Francisco and Pittsburgh. You know how that's going to change? The people, not only drivers will lose jobs. What are others? Insurance companies will lose jobs. State troopers, they won't be able to give a ticket to Google. You know, imagine that those kind of DMVs, driver's education, all those kind of cascading effects. We're going to change a lot. So today, I'm trying to redefine. The purpose of good education is not get you ready for college or for career, is to get you ready to be successfully financially independent. I call this out of your parents' basement readiness. Are you able to stay out of your parents' basement? So we have today, whatever I see, is all these reforms. People always talk American education. You know, we complain. America spends the most out of any industrialized country on education, but how come we rank so low? We want test scores higher. No, we've trivialized American education. A $10,000 education, that's how much we spend average per student in public school, should not be the same as a $10 education. That's how much spent in other countries. You can get high test scores with $10, but you cannot get creativity, entrepreneurship with $10. Why are we reducing this? America has very low goal today. You know, today we face much bigger issues. We have a divided country. We have a massive group of basement kids. You know, we call them a new generation of kids. We call them the Boomerang Generation. You know what the boomerang is, you guys? You threw them away, they come back to live in your parents' basement and never live again. That's the Australian. You threw them out, they come back. We have a huge problem internationally. Human conflicts, we're killing each other, all these things. There's a bigger problems America needs to address. So how can we address this problem? This is what we think. We have to rethink about technology has created opportunities, but our education reform efforts are not helping our children to look at the opportunities. Instead, we are trying to divert their attention towards the past, towards something they don't need. So let's think about the opportunities. I have a story for you. We're coming up, Christmas is coming. So I hear Christmas songs everywhere. You know, during Christmas time, you always talk about a guy called Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. Do you remember those guys? Yeah. So what happened to Rudolph? Rudolph was not liked by anybody because his nose was too red and shiny, remember? So nobody liked him. He was put into special education. Because the state standard was to have a black nose. So he was in special ed. He was trying to be corrected. But in the end, what happened? On the foggy Christmas Eve, Santa Claus was looking for a GPS. And Rudolph suddenly became very useful. So here's my best story for you to think about how the useless becomes useful. Revolution does that. Every revolution redefines human talent. We have a lot of people who would traditionally be useless. I can tell you this. The reason I'm standing here is because I was useless in my village. When I was growing up in my village, my village in Sichuan province, driving the water buffalo was the village common core standard, okay? And I couldn't do the buffalo very well. So that's why my father said, why don't you just go to school? Don't mess with us here. Instead of trying to fix me to become a mediocre Chinese farmer, I did something else. So I would say, before I become a professor, I was a failed Chinese farmer. So I'm a failure as a Chinese farmer. Think about useless to useful. And another good example, I know this goes on broadcasting. I hope she's watching this. Kim Kardashian is a good example of how the useless become useful. You know, you can do research on this. You know, what does she do? What does she know? You know, you don't have to know much in essence. She is a celebrity for nothing. She is famous for being well known, but she is not in her parents' basement. In a new age, technology creates new opportunities. So how do we compete with smart machines? The best Jeopardy player is a computer. The best chess player is a computer right now. And actually, it's getting more and more smart. So how do we do that? The only thing we can change is that in order to beat smart machines, we have to become more human. Traditional education was to prepare employees. We were reducing human beings into machines. That's why we have standards. Everything we produce were mutually irreplaceable. Do you guys notice that all the standards we have there? Not only everybody have to know the same thing, they have to know everything at the same time. That's how our traditional education. We do not look at what you can do. We look at your shiny nose as a problem, not as a strength to support. Everybody, human beings, is different. We have a jagged profile of success. When you are bad at something, you must be good at something. Everyone is this. Everyone has different passions. There's new research. Everybody really has hope, has diversity, but our schools tends to homogenize, tends to select people. So what I would suggest for the new paradigm, we need to shift. We need to abandon the horse wagon. We need to invent a new system. So number one, we have to think about readiness doesn't work. We do not try to be ready for school, make every school ready for us. So here are a few suggestions. Number one, we need to have policy that stimulates local innovation so we can all start moving towards a new revolution, a new paradigm. That's how we start. Number two, we have to look at every individual as someone with potential. They are not somebody to be fixed. They have strength to be enhanced. Instead of fixing individual students, we enhance their strength. We have to think about value making. Today, all our children, we have disengaged kids. They have talent, they have effort, but not many of them know how to create value. When you create value for other people, when you can better other people's life with your talent, your effort, you actually have a career. People will need you. People will value you. We need to think about a new way of designing schools. Traditional schools were designed based on the average. It's like those chairs. Those chairs are very uncomfortable. You're sitting there. Remember, those chairs are designed for the average person. But nobody is average. Do you notice that? The new chairs are the ones that allow you to control the different things. Allow students to adjust their own education. Personalized education system. Project-based learning. Authentic learning. And finally, we have to think about the globe. We got engaged in the globe. Today's technology allows us to learn from others, with others, and for other people on a global scale. So today, if you go home, look hard at every individual student. With a sense of hope, how are you creating opportunity for every individual talent? Not trying to fix them, but support them. If we did all of that, our kids will stay out of our basement. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Stephanie Jansky, Director of Programming at the City Club of Cleveland, and today we're enjoying a forum with Dr. Yong Zhao, Foundation Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of Kansas. We're about to begin the audience Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those of you joining us via our webcast. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it at the City Club, and our staff will try and work it into the program. We want to remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. Holding the microphones today are Content Coordinator Teddy Eisenberg and Marketing and Outreach Coordinator Faye Walker. May we have the first question, please?
Yes, sir. Before the luncheon, I asked you about international students, and you seem to be very high on their possibilities. Could you expand a little bit about that?
Thank you. International students, I think I was one of them, so I definitely like them, okay? I like all international students. I think the international students today in the US is actually extremely important on multiple levels, culturally. As you know, this is a country of immigration. If you do any economical studies, immigrants bring different ideas. They actually drive up the innovation. So we need culture, we need to have them. Right now, today, we have practical reason. As the public support for higher education dwindles, and honestly, international students are a big financial resource as well. And number three, international students are also, if you think about democracy, they are the potential people to spread ideas about the American value in other places. You know, I don't want to call them the American spies, but I think it's important thing about the value to spread. And finally, they could become in the future very tremendous resource for supporting U.S. Multinational companies in many different ways. And generally right now, however, I would like to say, we're not treating their students very well. Many universities do not know how to work with them. Okay, we need to spend a lot of efforts trying to deal with that piece.
Dr. Zhao, you're over here on the other side of the room. Your presentation reminds me of my 1960s liberal arts education, frankly. You're emphasizing skills that lead to creativity and entrepreneurship is basically the background in how to think and solve problems. So I'd like you to comment on that and whether you think that's a model we ought to be looking back at and trying to reinvigorate maybe in many people's minds.
You're absolutely right. I think nothing I'm advocating here is new philosophically. If you think back to John Dewey, to Rousseau, it's all child-centered. It's all about the value of humanity. I was thinking it's a different time now. Like if, say, in the 1960s, you might have a choice. And to say the society, because society is actually valued more assembly line workers and all those things. Today, I would call this is not only something nice to do, but it's actually economical necessity. You know, that's what I think. This is, the more human we can be, the better we can beat the machines, because we cannot become machines. And ironically, it's funny, like in Asian countries, they're trying to borrow more liberal arts education. And all the universities are trying to go more liberal arts. So when I was talking about how the US and Western countries have been trying to borrow practices from East Asian countries, and the East Asian countries actually are trying to reform their education to become more like America, which makes sense, right? If you think about the middle of the Pacific is Hawaii, that's called paradise. That's how you, if you move to the middle, actually it won't work. It's not a middle thing. But I think, yes, there's definitely gist into that. But one thing I would add to say, today is much more possible to deliver those kind of personalized education because of technology.
Hi there. I personally think that critical thinking, observation, and communication skills are the three most important skills that anybody can have to be able to react and succeed in the future world. But I don't know how our current education system can teach those. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. I think I'd like to add a little bit of that. You know, the traditional mindset, as what I call the employee-oriented education mindset, always like to prescribe things for everybody. You know, the traditional people prescribe content, math, science, reading. The new people now prescribe 21st century skills. But that's actually, I would still say that's outdated mindset. You've heard about the 4 C's? Now it's getting better. People are getting up to 6 C's now. Some people talk about 9 C's. English is a good language, have many words with C's. So what I would like to say, yes, people talk communication, critical thinking, creativity, entrepreneurial thinking, all those words. But remember, all of them are domain specific. Communication in one area is not the same as in other areas. And also remember, not everybody will be equally communicative. I actually would love to say, you know, you've seen a lot of very inventive people. They hate to talk to people. Let them be. You know, so I don't really believe in imposing the same set of skills on everybody, because today you cannot just be mediocre anymore. Traditional jobs require mediocrity. So I would like to go back to say that first thing we need to start is driving the individual passion. I mean, if you do not want to talk to people, but you are a great writer, it's fine. Hire somebody else to talk on your behalf. You know, that's called outsourcing, and that's and outsourcing your talents. So, but how do we do this? Is the how part is I wrote in the book. It's a book commercial. You can buy the book, but anyway, just in case you don't want to buy the book, it's through authentic learning experiences. I'm working with a lot of classrooms and schools to build something what I call transform your class into enterprise. If you run your class as enterprise, every child has a role to play in it. Enterprise is not just one simple project-based learning. Everybody does the same thing. You need leaders. You need talkers. You need communicators. So engage children in authentic product making. Learning should be doing by itself. It's not learning by doing. Actually, it's learning to do. Another thing is that our children today have not been able to, what I call, identify problems worth solving. We ask them to become problem solvers, actually need to become problem identifiers. If you can identify the problem worth solving, it will be great. So like, for example, you guys sitting here, do you know who cares about your existence? Are you of genuine value to other people? So once you do that, you're making authentic products, authentic experiences. That actually means you will have to be critical. You will have to be creative in your own domain.
Thank you. Last night, one of my children, I have 3 children in college right now, and the youngest one said he was dropping out. And I was so upset, but now that I've heard you, I think he's heard you too, because he created a video. He stayed up all night creating a video. And this morning, the coach came by and gave him $50. He said, that's why I'm dropping out, because I'm 18, I created a video, and I got paid for my talent. He stayed up all night working on it. He was very passionate about it. But I told him that as a black male, you're not going to be able to walk around undegreed, because the perception already is that you're in the gap and you're going to stay in the gap. So can you just talk about that a little bit, about the perception of a college degree?
Thank you. I think I will tell you this one idea about, do not think about deviation from the norm is a failure. So like I walked away from being a farmer, and I have another story. My son, it's the same thing. My son went to the University of Chicago. He wants to be a good Chinese kid and try to study economics so he can, make some money. But after 2 years, I think he decided not to do it. He said, Dad, I'm not going to study economics, and there may be I said, why? He said, there are too many Asians, in economics. And I said, really, why? He said, my math is not as good as. I said, well, if you're not good at math, do something else. I said, what are you going to do now? He said, I'm going to study art history. Remember, those considered from the worst prospect in terms of job, right? Art is bad, history is bad, combined it's even worse. But anyway, so I said, go for it, and he did. That's his love, that's his passion. He was out of my basement right away, and we graduated. He worked for the Chicago Arts Club. After 3 years, now he's on the full scholarship studying art history at a Ph.D. at Stanford. So that's actually I wrote for the Arts USA. I said how art can get your kids out of your basement. So the key to him is that has to be very good, and you have to be good. You have to be great. But another piece about a college degree, I really think we are entering this new age called credential inflation. Imagine everyone gets a college degree. There will be no differentiation. You remember those data? The reason you can say college kids made more than high school kids, because there were people in high school. If everybody had a college degree, there's no variation. How are you going to do this whole thing? So I think actually today, with a new economy, if your child is good, if he is good, he will not necessarily need it, or he can go to have a college to support him. So that, again, he has to be very good. You only when you are not very good, you go basically, only if you don't know what to do, you go to college with some money, and then just discover what you do. Another piece is, I didn't say this once, I said, to this child, every child needs to learn how to make college work for you. You do not work for college. Did you know in our K-12 schools, we make our children work for the college? All these years, your SAT, your GPA, and you go to school, you also do the same thing. When I talk to other people, I said, yes, everybody wants to go to Harvard. But do you know how to make Harvard work for you? Your 4 years. You're spending so much money there. Is that worth it? So that's the same thing. If he needs it, he can go back.
With jobs changing so quickly, you talk about the kids going to school today, 65% are going to be in jobs that aren't even defined yet. So I'm just wondering, I cover manufacturing as a reporter, so I wonder about how companies should be positioning themselves to build their future workforce if, the job titles aren't even there yet.
Thank you so much. Well, since you're an expert in that area, you probably have seen the ups and downs in all the manufacturer sector. I think it's, in essence, all the companies, what they have to do, if they have to think about developing global talent. They have to develop the program. And right now, it's, everybody's on a global supply chain. And the talents are distributed globally as well. And no one can make the same product for like 5-10 years. They have to change. So companies have to, I think, become more educational, become educational entities and rethink about this idea. And by the way, you probably also noticed that the economy is also shifting to another one, someone called solo economy. A lot of people are not joining the whole institution anymore. They're just providing the service as expertise. You do crowdsourcing of talents, crowdsourcing of ideas. So that's changing too. I think company has to rethink about that as well.
Hi, thank you so much for the speech today. It was really inspiring. I just want to understand your view on the rise of online classrooms in recent years, like Udacity, Coursera, and those that provides professional training for people like through the internet. Thank
you. I think, first of all, I think any of those things are good, especially when they are free. Okay, if it's free, it's even better. And the challenge is this: online education. I would say, online education does not provide you a true education. It provides you instruction. Remember, I distinguish the instruction from education. Education is the growth of human being. Instruction is the transmission of knowledge or development of skills. So when you take online, Ohio is going to face a challenge. When you do K-12 online school, there's no education, there's instruction. Okay, so if you want to learn how to become a better person, work with others, develop your social, emotional, moral things, I don't think that delivered that. But if you want to learn something special, you can do it. As we talk about when you're making real product, you want to learn how to do accounting. You can learn that thing. So this has implications for actually K-12, for high school, like especially your child. If you want to design a video, a game, he can use it. So online actually has done a lot. Think about, I think last month, Thanksgiving, the quality of Americans' turkeys have improved because of YouTube. Would you agree, right? It's now, I think you don't have to rely on your grandmother's recipe. You can have many grandmothers now for you, right? So that's the value of those kind of systems. However, do you think that made your family dinner better? I don't know. Maybe that's a different story. So yes, these are very good resources we need to learn to use, but they do not provide a good education. I think the question you ask is very important, especially in K-12, because right now there's a lot of for-profit organizations trying to offer online education for students. They offer online instruction, maybe good, maybe bad, but they cannot offer online education. Education is a growth of human beings. It's not simple acquisition of knowledge or skills. If anyone is listening, I might piss off some online providers, but
thank you very much for being here and bringing out the fact that these jobs that our children are going to learn in the future aren't even created yet. I work for a foundation that has a project-based learning program teaching empathy. Where do you see the role of empathy in our educational system, not only in our educators, but teaching it to our children? And I like the fact that you brought out the fact that every child has potential, no matter whether their skills are in core learning or in other areas.
So what's the about what? Empathy. Thank you so much. Actually, I would say empathy would be one of the foundations that human beings have. Actually, we have that thing. When you say you create value for others, that has to do with empathy. You understand other people's challenges, other people's problems. That's actually how we begin it. And I also would like to think human beings, I did not get to explain this, a lot of things were inherently actually born with those empathy, but they might have been crushed. Okay, so think about learning. When you have children, a lot of us are born with some kind of talents, but in certain systems, they're being stifled. Okay, so I joke about this, not only about empathy, but also about creativity. Many people, you probably receive a lot of Asian educators come to U.S., learn how Americans teach kids to be more creative, they can't find any evidence. Really, in our schools, we don't teach our kids to be more creative. Really, it's we are as bad in trying to stifle their creativity. We're just not as successful. Because of this kind of other programs we have, the diversity we have, the local control we have. That's the kind of thing. So in America, we have all kinds of possibilities. But again, we're losing that. Okay, and so there is rising interest now in asking people to say, if you want to hold schools accountable, do not just hold them accountable for test scores in 2 subjects. Check on the non-cognitive domains. Empathy. Do they like it? Do they have confidence? So you need to look at those and remember side effects. We need everybody to give us a side effects list. You hear, actually, you should, anybody comes to a school to sell you a model, you should always ask them, what's the side effects? Will this make my kid hate math forever? So you want to think about those things. Thank you.
So absent test scores to act as like a common denominator, what mechanism should like a given institution use to gauge differences in students?
Interviews, talking to you. I have seen schools doing this thing like they always look at what you've done. Actually, we do this. When I admit Ph.D. students, I ignore the GRE scores. I talk to them. I look at what they've done. So I say, you are interested in this, but what have you done for your interest? That's a very good evidence. And today it's very easy to transmit those evidence now. It's 30 years ago, may not be able to do it. However, institutions have a hard time. That's too expensive. Have individual interviews. So many institutions, especially public universities now, they do not have the staff to do that. Private institutions, however, they can. They actually they're looking for what they call interesting people. Remember when everyone gets a 2,400 on the SAT or the new 1,600, doesn't make you interesting. You don't stand out. So you need to have other evidence. In fact, many institutions now are asking, so you don't have to submit your SAT or SAT scores. They ask you to submit some other evidence. And so there are many different ways to do this. For me, actually, I just talk to you, and that'll be actually I know exactly what's going to happen. So much better than I rely on one piece of evidence.
Thank you for being here today. I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit more to how we can create the demand from the stakeholders that would need to be demanding the changes that would drive the type of substantial innovations that you're describing. So rethinking what schools look like, et cetera. I think, again, it's much discussed that classrooms look very similar to the way they did 40 years ago, which is pretty stunning. But I think the problem has been the demand has never actually been generated by parents, communities, business, teachers, et cetera. So how do we do that?
Thank you very much. I think, just ask the CIT Club to do more programming like this, okay? However, seriously is that the demand actually is there. If you look at the business, people always talk about we actually don't have talents. Remember, we have this very strange talent mismatch globally. On the one hand, we have people who can't find jobs. On the other hand, businesses, we can't find people. There's actually always annual report of those things. However, I think that there is a disconnection between people who are making school policy decisions and the so-called stakeholders. For example, you think of parents. I get emails from parents all the time. They say, how do we mobilize this change? And the change, remember, the change is now made by whom? We actually have a hard time finding who is making the change. Do you guys notice this thing? I go anywhere. Teachers are complaining, said, we don't like all this mandate, all this accountability testing. We would like to be more innovative for our kids. Principals doing the same thing, and the government say we want the same thing. So there's really a lack of dialogue of this thing. But they actually need, if you go around, is there. Another thing we're missing is the brief or the courage we need to say those things don't really matter, the test scores, because the policymakers, and we got a new state board member here. You go there, they said, okay, what they were talking about, they said, how are we going to hold schools accountable? Remember those things? They said, so we know it's bad. They said, well, it's better than nothing, but we didn't really study enough. It actually does damages if you look at test scores. And you're going to battle all the time with the new vouchers, new charter school, online schools. If media only talks about test scores, they didn't produce enough test scores. they are busy driving the old discourse. So we need to actually have media, where the report, you should report educational, and we need to change this discourse. So when people ask me, can you discredit the test scores of international tests? I said, I don't even want to talk about it. It's not worth talking about. We need to rethink about something. Just because, I mean, many of you know the damages that's done by IQ test, right? IQ test used to be used in the 1920s, 30s as a way to keep people away from this country, to allocate immigration actually quotas, those things. I was supposed to be very scientific. So until we began to expose those things, we're not going to have this big change. I think we need to change the discourse and a lot more conversation. And another thing I would like to say is actually somebody trying to have the courage to change, to do something, to make a viable, like maybe the state of Cleveland can do it, like just call it state. You could become a state, okay. The state of Cleveland could be brave enough to say, we want to do something different. I actually think we might have a chance to do this because of new law, the ESSA coming out. I'm sorry I did not answer all your questions. You should go to a PR firm,
Thank you, Doctor, for such a stimulating presentation. You mentioned a growing, we might say, increase in Asian education to incorporate what we might call maybe an American spirit of creativity, entrepreneurship, and other things. Do you see examples of, or have more thoughts about a blend of East and West? I know that, are broad meta terms, but, a blend of those sort of, we might say, approaches or emphasis in education.
It's happening. 10 years ago, I actually developed a school in Beijing. It's called a 3E International Kindergarten, which in each given day, children move between the eastern side and western side of education. On the so-called western side, it's all done in English. It's called child-centered approach, the Reggio model. On the western side, it's called knowledge-centered, taught in Chinese language. Now we're running from kindergarten to, I think, 3rd grade. That's one of the most successful schools in China. And if you go to Beijing, you can go visit that school called 3E International Kindergarten. But there's more other attempts to try this. However, I also discovered some problems. If you do it later, what happens is time. Children's time is a constant, is limited. When you do more of this, you do something else, that's very hard. So when you were younger, I wanted people to have 2 different views, conflicting perspectives in their mind. But once it gets older, it's very hard to do. So that's why sometimes actually it gets sacrificed. And we have, I don't know if you have students, we've seen a lot of international students come in, even for high school in the US, for the high school. So on the one hand, they admire the creativity, confidence, those kind of education. On the other hand, they want test scores to go up. So at that time, it's very hard to balance both later on.
My name is Jason Williams, and you mentioned how your failure as a farmer contributed to your success as a scholar. Can you speak on how failure can contribute to success, and what can organizations, specifically in the after-school and out-of-school space, do to reinforce that notion?
Thank you very much. I not only failed at farming, I also failed at math. So I have to tell you that so that's proof not all Chinese are good at math. Okay, it's just so just to show you how bad I was. Okay, I got a 3 out of 100 in a college entrance exam. That's bad. Okay, 3 out of 100, and that's why I actually learned English, because in China in 1982, that's the last year. So if you are bad in math, if you try to major in languages, foreign languages, math is not count towards your total score. So that was, I don't know why, but that's it. So anyway, so my English wasn't good either. I remember I started learning English in the farming, rural high school, when I was 14. So I said, well, at least it's better than my math. So that was what I want institutions to do, actually not societies to do, is look very hard. We have this idea that we call growth mindset, that everybody can learn, which is very true. But the issue is this. Yes, everybody can learn, But if we spend equal amount of time on something you are talented in, and you have the resource to do, you really become great. Otherwise, you become mediocre. For example, I can try play for the Broncos. I don't know, what team you guys have? Okay. Somebody else, okay. No. Who are you guys? What? Oh, the Browns. Okay, fine. That's the only name I know. Okay. So, look at me, right? I can try to get scholarship. I can practice, you know the 10,000 hour rule. If I spend 10,000 hours trying to play this thing, I might be able to kick it once a while, but it has no value for me. So institutions not only have to reinforce the idea of, quote, you can learn, but really apply the efforts in the area you can excel. Not in areas trying to, sometimes it's simple stupidity to do things you have no hope. You know, that's what. So don't get me wrong, you guys can all learn. We can all learn to paint. But very few of us, no matter how hard you try, can become a Picasso. Thank you.
Today at the City Club, we are enjoying a forum with Dr. Yong Zhao, Foundation Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of Kansas. Dr. Zhao appears today as part of our series on education innovation sponsored by Nordson. Additional support for today's forum is provided by Advance Ohio. We are grateful for your commitment to the City Club forums. The community partner for today's forum is the Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM. Our hospitality partner is the Metropolitan at the 9 Hotel. We thank you both for your partnership. We welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland State University Center for Educational Leadership, Cuyahoga County Community College, Mayfield City School District, NEOEA, and the NeoSTEM ecosystem. Additionally, we welcome students from MC Squared STEM High School, Notre Dame Cathedral Latin School, Solon High School, and St. Martin de Porres. Student participation in City Club forums is provided by many foundations, including the Laub Foundation. We thank all of you for being here today. The sale of two of Dr. Zhao's books, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Dragon and World-Class Learners, is provided by a cultural exchange. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you, Dr. Zhao. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.